Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to all of you. Now today we'll start lecture 3. In lecture 3 we will be discussing on the evolution on law on electricity. We have already started discussing on how the law has progressed from 1910 Act and all the way up to post independence phase. So now we will be discussing that what are the problems which occurred in the 1948 Act, and how because of that a new legislation was brought in order to bring in necessary reform in this sector. The reason why the sector could not perform well because of the monopoly which the state started enjoying in the sector, and what has started happening is that the electricity boards became all powerful in this sector, be it the generation, be it distribution or transmission, in all these sectors. And because of the poor management, because of the political interference, and also because of the gap between demand and supply, ACBs could not perform well, and because of that there was a kind of demand made to bring in the reform and to dismantle electricity boards, so that necessary capital can be attracted in this sector. Because we know very well that electricity sector is a cost intensive sector, and therefore, lot of capital investment is required, and which because of the poor financial management of ACBs, and for which we also indicate the political interference in this sector as one of the reasons. The necessary improvement, necessary infrastructural improvement in the sector did not happen, and because of that what started happening is that the boards started failing to fulfill the requirements which are needed for giving the necessary impetus to the economic growth. And because of that, I was telling in the last session also that the central government decided to pitch in, particularly in augmenting the generating capacity, and thus we had seen that two significant entities came into existence to increase the capacity on generation front, and which is NTPC and NHPC, and they were largely been brought into existence in order to minimize that demand supply gap. And also we were aware of the fact that because of regional imbalances in terms of generation, in terms of infrastructure, there were a lot of energy insecurity was there. There was a lot of imbalance which was there between the regions, and therefore it was rightly thought that with the help of the central government and the central owned utilities, this gap can be minimized, and thus there was a need felt to have a sort of grid connection, and with this interconnectedness of the grid, there was a stability which was attempted to bring in this sector. So these were the changes which were brought in. No doubt about it that the central public sector utilities attempted to bring in the necessary cushioning to the electricity boards, but then that was also not enough, because largely the distribution was still with the electricity boards, and they were not investing enough to bring in the necessary change to be it the technical, be it the other infrastructural requirement, and therefore whatever arrangements were being done to supply the electricity, it was not getting channelized properly for the benefit of the end consumer, and this somehow aggravated the role of the government. This somehow invited the government to bring in more reform in this sector. And by the time also there was economic crisis in the country, there was serious problem with the loan repayment, and a pressure was there from the global organization to open up the market, and electricity sector was considered to be one prominent sector where the privatization was advocated very vehemently. And with this we have witnessed that in the electricity sector the government decided to open up, government decided to invite the private participation in generation segment. And with this we have seen that there is independent power producers which were being invited, attracted to come and invest in India, and also it was suggested that let this independent power producers need not be concerned about the distribution and all, they can directly sell the generated electricity to the distribution utility, and distribution utility can make the payment directly to them, and so that they need to just focus on the very enhancement of the generation capacity. So that is what was being done. Also a 1948 Act was amended to empower the government to fix the tariff, which was earlier been left between the ACBs and generating companies. And obviously we can understand that because of the kind of vertically integrated structure, it was very difficult to have a very professional approach in tariff determination, and this leads to a sort of inefficiency in this sector. The ACBs, which was completely owned by the state, failed to deliver the required services. It failed to fulfill the expectations of the industry, of the consumer, and also a biggest issue was with regard to revenue generation, because somewhere the ACBs were not in a position to collect the charges from the end consumer, either because of the lower tariff which has been fixed, or maybe because of the artificially lower tariff which has been assigned for certain sector, for example agricultural sector, and then which costed very hugely to the whole segment, because we need to understand this very categorically, that electricity sector thrives and survives on the basis of the performance of the distribution segment, because the revenue gets generated from the efficient handling of distribution segment. And this is something which was the reason for introducing the reform with the opening up of the market in the year 1991, and 1991 brought in a new age altogether in this sector. It has to be seen, it has to be analyzed that how that change has done good to the sector. No doubt about it that one important and prominent change which was done is the involvement of the private sector, involvement of the private capital in generating unit. So now in generating segment we do have the participation of both private as well as public sectors. So this was a kind of important change, and therefore the earlier understanding that the electricity sector is somewhere it is to be seen as a kind of natural monopoly of the state, where state alone needs to get involved in the generation, that was somewhere been diluted. And I would not say that when India started with this understanding on generation being a natural monopoly, India was kind of experimenting completely different from what was going at the global level. Right in the mid 50s of the last century, this was the practice in developed countries as well as leading developing countries, where state used to control the generation. But as the time progressed, as the demand increased, and as well as the kind of unprofessional approach of the government agencies, it was realized that this monopoly needs to be revisited, and because of that only the government of India also decided to bring in a kind of corporate culture in electricity boards, and on this premise government proposed a sort of unbundling of the power sector, wherein not only private capital was invited, but also it was suggested that whatever was under the control of the government, that segment also needs to be completely corporatized. The reason being that with the new kind of culture needed to bring in the reform in the sector, it is essential that the very work culture, the very approach is needed to be transformed, and therefore it was categorically decided that regulatory changes are to be brought in, and with that some kind of fiscal discipline need to be introduced, and this is what kind of you may say a change which has been brought in the power sector with the advent of the globalization drive in our country. In fact, when you look at the resolution passed by Government of India in the year 1991, when the government was discussing the new economic policy in a very aggressive way, so that the necessary economic growth can be reestablished, can be rechannelized in order to not only uplift the larger mass from poverty, but also to give economic growth a new life, a new lease of life. And in pursuant to that, this 1991 resolution of the Government of India played a significant role, where it was suggested that private sectors, they can very well suggest the proposal without involving SEBs, without soliciting electricity boards, and then it was also suggested that private sectors can very well get involved in supply and distribution of electricity, even if they are not owning a generating units. So in a way you can very well look at it that the government in a very methodological way, in a very strategic way, decided to open up the market, open up all the segments in this sector. Along with that also government has decided to invite foreign ownership up to 100% in this power sector, power market, and along with that there was an important concern that if you invite the private party players, if the private participants are joining hand, then how they will become sustainable, what will be the kind of economic model for them, so that they need not fear about the loss. And for that it was suggested that let there be a long term power purchase agreement which shall ensure 16% return on equity. So this was in a way to give a confidence to the private players that you please come invest in this sector, and as far as your investment is concerned, there is a guarantee that you will be not losing in your business, you will be going with some kind of profit, which obviously will be a kind of regulated one in terms of what shall be the kind of zone which is to be seen. That is what is important to look at. And this is, I would say that this was an important promise which was given in order to build the confidence of the investor in this market. Moving further from 1991 policy, when you look at the recommendation of the National Development Council, which was again a body given with the responsibility to advise the Government of India and all the states, where there was a sort of collective responsibility, collective decision making is been taken, that it is important to cater the interest of the consumer. Power sector must be delivering its services in such a manner so that consumers' interest must be taken care of. Now, when you talk about the consumer interest, let me also highlight this very categorically, that it is for both categories of consumers. residential consumer as well as the industrial or commercial consumer. Because as I said in the last session, that access to electricity is not only about economic growth, but it is also about uplifting the living standards of individual, and therefore, any discussion on the interest of consumer must not be only for the industrial consumer or commercial consumer, but must be for all segments, must be for all the set of consumers. And also it was decided that the state government needs to stay away from the management of the electricity boards. The reason being, it has been witnessed in 70s and 80s that because of furthering of narrower political interest, it was the government was in a way not allowing the electricity boards to function in a very professional manner, and that was that was something which brought a very heavy cost on the complete sector, on the entire supply chain segment, and that is the reason why it was suggested that let the government stay away from the functioning of the electricity boards, let the electricity boards be autonomous, be in technical aspects as well as on the financial issues, because unless and until we ensure that autonomy, the technical and commercial losses cannot be addressed, which is an important area of concern as far as efficient functioning of the power sector is concerned. And financial autonomy, as I said, is another important area, because that is what is the basis of building a very robust mechanism, building a very kind of fertile mechanism for this sector, because unless and until there is a sort of inflow of income, it is very difficult to have a very sustainable model of the industry, sustainable model of all the players which are participating in this sector. And that is why it was suggested that let there be a tariff fixation connected with distribution cost and the generation cost. So it was the cost factor which was brought into existence. The reason being, on earlier occasion, cost was completely sort of overlooked, particularly for those set of consumers which were in a way constituting a vote bank for the political parties, and that is why it is suggested that let the cost, be it the generation or the distribution, be an important criteria for the determination of tariff. Apart from that, it was also realized that because of unprofessional approach of the ACBs, because of a sort of hand in glove approach of the officials, there was a big issue of unauthorized use of electricity or theft of electricity, and that was causing a tremendous revenue loss to the sector. And on that premise, this 1993, in the year 1993, the Development Council very rightly suggested that let there be a stringent measures need to be implemented in order to eliminate unauthorized use and theft. Obviously, as we progress in our lecture, I will be discussing in detail what are the provisions which are there in the Electricity Act and how the new law has attempted to address this malleus. Now, when this reform was suggested, Odisha became the first state to adopt this reform. One reason why Odisha was considered as a reason to experiment this change was lesser dependency of the state on agricultural sector. It was less than 10% consumption of energy in agricultural sector in Odisha made this state to be a kind of experimental ground for seeing that how the reform will work. And that is the reason you see in the year 1995, Odisha enacted a law, that is Odisha Electricity Reforms Act, and it was followed in other states as well, in Haryana and Andhra, where it was decided to unbundle ACBs, it was decided to divide electricity boards in different segments depending upon considering the very set of activities which was being carried out, that is generation, transmission and distribution. But obviously, distribution was not privatized in these two states. The reason being that distribution segment closely interacts with the consumer. It is the consumer, the end consumer, particularly the retail one or the one who I may say matters for vote bank politics. They are directly or closely interacting with the distribution utility DISCOMs, and therefore the government decided to keep that portfolio to itself, so that if any kind of anger which was shown by the people, any kind of disapproval, any kind of displeasement which was shown by the population, by the people, then that can be addressed by stating that state is still involved in the private sector, state is still involved in the distribution sector. My apology. Now, moving further, I am giving you this series of events in order to make it very clear that how we have reached up to 2003 Act, and that is why I am giving this detail to you in module 1 itself. Now, in 1995, the government of India has come up with the mega power policy. Now, this mega power policy was announced again to attract the investment in a large power plant, particularly the thermal one, where the capacity is more than 1000 megawatt. And what was the promises which were being given? It was said that okay, those who will be coming and investing in mega power project, they will be getting a sort of tax holidays for good 10 years, and that will be something which will be phase wise, which will be adopted, and then there will be a exemption of custom duty for the imports, whatever equipment the industry would be bringing it from the outside country, they will be not charged any custom duties. So, through this there was sort of allurement which was advanced by the government that come and invest in India, and the government will be facilitating the whole process, and please take note of this, that all these were being promised not because of this very fact that electricity is needed for bringing in necessary thrust to the industrial growth, but it was needed also for other socio-economic benefits. And that is why these concessions are to be seen as a concession not only for industrial players, but also for common man, also for general population of the country. It would be wrong to say that, it would be unjust to say that this kind of concessions which are being extended by the government is only for the big industries, because at the end of the day the product is going to be made available to both industry as well as to the common man. And for this also the government suggested that let there be speedier clearances of the proposals which the private parties would be submitting in this regard. 1996, again working on this very agenda of privatizing this sector, the government of India adopted this common minimum action plan for power, which was announced by the nodal ministry, that is Ministry of Power. The Ministry of Power is the nodal ministry for this sector, and the best part was that this common minimum action plan was announced in consultation with the states. So, by that time there was a sort of realization even on the part of the states that we need to come forward and converge on the issues of reform. And please do take note of this very fact that electricity being in the concurrent list, it is not only desirable to take the states on board, but it is also one of the requisites in order to ensure the success of the reform. If the states are not brought in to states are not brought in on board, if states have not agreed to it, then the initiative of the central government would not see the light of the day, or even if it sees, it will be in a very fragmented way, and it will not be bringing the change in a comprehensive manner what is truly envisaged. And that is why this common minimum action plan plays a significant role, because the states came together, they reiterated this very fact that let electricity boards be corporatized. Obviously, the idea was suggested that let there be no privatization at the very first instance, obviously in order to avoid a sort of anger from the public, as well as to test the water that how private players operate in this segment. And that is why it was decided that let the unbundling happen, let it get corporatized, with public ownership at the first instance, right at the beginning, and gradually gradually they can be made privatized. Now, corporatization here means that they will have a separate identity, independent of the state government, and that identity will ensure the accountability, that identity will ensure the liability, that identity will make them more accountable to the people on their functionings, and that is what corporatization would mean for our purposes. What we say in legal term, in legal sense, that giving a status of juristic person to the corporate body, which will have independent existence from the owner, from the one who has created it. Other important thing which was suggested was efficient metering and energy audits, because earlier the metering was not made mandatory, and because of that very fact, there are a lot of privilege which was happening. There was no proper collection of charges from the end user, and that was causing huge loss of earning for the distribution utility, and in turn the money was not being paid, the cost was not being paid to the generating units, and that is why it was suggested that let there be an efficient metering be done. And for that purpose, it was suggested that let there be a regulatory commission created at the state level. Now, this is an important development. Why? Because it was now decided in 1996 that we need to set the rules of the game, which will be done by the regulatory commission, and then let the players play as per the rules, and if they breach the rule, then the regulatory commission will take necessary action. So, instead of becoming the owner of the rule as well as the player of the game, what was suggested that let the rule be made by an independent body and all the players adhere to those rules, and with this design it was suggested that let there be a creation of state electricity regulatory commission, which should be given a responsibility to determine the tariff on a very objective manner, which shall be given a responsibility to develop the market. So, these were the suggestions which were being given, and 1996 it was also suggested that let there be a tariff determination done on the basis of a principle that the investor must get at least 3% of return on capital. And again I am iterating and emphasizing that this is needed, badly needed, in order to infuse the confidence in the investor, and that is why it was decided at that point of time. And one way of ensuring this return was asking the user of electricity, the consumer of electricity, to pay at least 50% of the average cost, because it is known fact, which I will be discussing in detail in latter part of the course, that it is not that all consumers in the power sector they pay the same tariff. Industrial consumers, they pay higher tariff than the residential consumers or consumers in agricultural sector, and generally the industrial consumers or commercial consumers, they pay also on a part of sum they pay also on behalf of these consumers, and that is what we know as cross subsidy. So, it was decided that let the cross subsidy continue because of the paying ability of the other set of consumers, but at the same time the residential consumer or the agricultural consumer should not be asked to pay a sum which add no value to the whole revenue generation model. So, at least it was suggested that they should be paying at least 50% of the average cost, and with this what we have seen is the introduction of a new law giving a statutory recognition to the Electricity Regulatory Commission in the year 1998, and this commission created the two institutions, one at the central level, other at the state level. At the central level it is Central Electricity Regulatory Commission, and at the state level it is State Electricity Regulatory Commission. So, these two commissions came into existence and they have been entrusted with the responsibility to bring in necessary professional changes in this sector. So, what we have seen is this, that in the 1998 Act it was introduced, it was brought in to create an independent body known as Regulatory Commission. Now, this Regulatory Commission was being entrusted with responsibility to bring necessary functional autonomy to this sector. Functional autonomy in a sense of that what shall be the primary objective, what shall be the fundamental criteria for tariff determination, so that undue interferences not to play a role in the determination of the tariff. And in order to advance this, it was suggested that Regulatory Commission has suggested that let the tariff fixation be based on availability based tariff, which involves the fixed cost, which also considers the fuel cost as well as unscheduled interchange which has been brought by the utilities. So, with this availability based tariff, what was suggested that the cost of establishing a generating company is to be somehow made inbuilt in the tariff fixation, and that is what is known as a kind of fixed cost in this process, and then fuel cost, which will be a sort of changed one depending upon the fixation of price on the fuel on which the generating companies are running. And then in order to ensure a sort of grid discipline, it was also suggested that if any kind of excessive draw of electricity takes place, then necessary charges are to be taken up. So, this mechanism was suggested in order to bring the discipline and in order to also recover the cost in a very scientific way. In addition to that, it was also suggested that let there be electricity grid code for maintaining the discipline in the sector, that what shall be the injection of electricity by the generating companies in the grid and what shall be the drawal by the utilities. So, grid code was suggested to bring in uniformity, bring in certainty in that sector, that approach. And apart from that, it was also suggested that let there be a guideline for issuing license in the transmission sector. So, the one who operates in the transmission segment must have a clear idea about the expectation of the market. And then open access was also introduced with an idea that let the market decides the pattern of supply and demand, and perhaps it was visualized that this kind of pattern will bring in necessary tariff valuation in the interest of the consumer. And it was also decided that there shall be a sort of rationalization of tariff at the distribution level. And for furthering the interest of the consumer, regulatory commissions at the state level was required to establish a complaint mechanism to look into the complaint lodged by the consumer. Though post 1991, the sector experienced considerable number of changes, be it policy, be it regulatory, be it institutional, but then the sector did not came out of the problem which it was confronting in pre-1991 era. And perhaps because of the reason that there was lack of commitment to bring in professional approach in the functioning of electricity boards. And as I said that it was the electricity board, the functioning of the electricity board on which revenue model was dependent. And therefore, the suggested change could not bring the desired result. The transmission and commercial laws continued to give challenges to the sector, and thus it was decided that a comprehensive reform is needed in the sector, and because of that we have now the Electricity Act of 2003. Thank you very much.